Ladies and gentlemen, brothers and sisters, today I want to talk about the life lessons I've learned from being inspired by the profound wisdom of Arthur Schopenhauer. As the great philosopher once said, a man can do what he wants, but not want what he wants. This simple yet powerful truth teaches us humility, a reminder that while we may control our actions, our deepest desires often come from a place beyond our conscious choice. Schopenhauer also reminds us it is difficult to find happiness within oneself, but it is impossible to find it anywhere else. In a world constantly chasing external validation, these words are a lighthouse in the storm, guiding us back to the quiet strength that lives within our own soul. He challenges us to see life not merely as a pursuit of pleasure, but as a discipline of the mind and a refinement of the spirit. Talent hits a target no one else can hit. Genius hits a target no one else can see. These words invite us to embrace vision, persistence, and courage, even when others don't understand our journey. And perhaps one of his most striking insights is this: compassion is the basis of morality. In a society where self-interest often takes the lead, Schopenhauer teaches that true greatness comes from our ability to feel, to connect, and to act with kindness toward all living beings. These lessons, drawn from his contemplations, are not just philosophical ideas. They are living principles, ones that shape how we face adversity, how we treat others, and how we discover meaning in a world that often feels uncertain. Today, I want to share how these timeless truths have not only inspired my thinking, but have transformed my way of living, my approach to challenges, and my understanding of purpose. Arthur Schopenhauer's profound observation that we can do what we want, but we cannot want what we want, is a truth that strikes at the very heart of human nature. It is an idea that seems simple when first heard, but the more you think about it, the more it reveals about life, desire, and the limits of our control. We often believe we are the masters of our choices, that our ambitions and wants are entirely self-directed. We like to think that if we put our mind to something, we can shape not only our actions, but also the very desires that drive those actions. But Schopenhauer reminds us that our desires have roots deeper than conscious thought, emerging from a place that is not entirely within our command. They are shaped by temperament, instinct, personality, and the mysterious inner will that governs so much of what we feel drawn toward in life. This realization is both humbling and liberating. It is humbling because it challenges the illusion of absolute self-determination. You can tell yourself to want something, perhaps a certain career, a certain lifestyle, a certain relationship, but if your heart is not truly aligned with it, if the inner will does not spark that desire within you, then the wanting will always feel forced. At the same time, it is liberating because it relieves us of the impossible burden of thinking we must control every aspect of our internal world. We cannot simply manufacture passion where there is none, nor can we force ourselves to stop wanting something by sheer willpower alone. Schopenhauer's insight opens the door to self-awareness. Instead of constantly trying to mold ourselves into what we think we should want, we can start to pay attention to what we naturally feel drawn to. This does not mean surrendering blindly to every impulse. Rather, it means understanding that desire is like a compass pointing toward the deeper currents of who we are. That compass can guide us toward the things that will bring us fulfillment, not because they are dictated by society's expectations, but because they resonate with the core of our being. Think of how often people pursue goals simply because they believe they should want them. A student chooses a certain field of study because it seems prestigious, not because it genuinely excites them. A professional stays in a career path that looks successful on the outside, but leaves them feeling hollow on the inside. These are examples of acting against the truths Schopenhauer highlights. The action, studying, working, striving, might be under their control, but the want, the real inner desire, is not something they chose. They may follow through on the actions, but without the natural alignment of will and desire, the process feels like a constant uphill battle. This truth can also help us approach failure and disappointment differently. Sometimes we fail not because we lacked discipline or intelligence, but because we were chasing something that was never truly ours to begin with. In those cases, failure becomes less of a defeat and more of a redirection toward what we were actually meant to want. It can also prevent us from judging others too harshly. If someone's desires are different from ours, it is not because they are foolish or misguided. It is simply because their inner will points in a different direction. Another layer to this idea is its relationship to contentment. Many of our frustrations in life come from wishing we wanted something different. A person might wish they had the drive to be a corporate leader, or the desire to work long hours building a business, or the hunger to pursue fame. But if those wants are not part of their inner nature, then wishing for them will only bring dissatisfaction. Instead, contentment grows from accepting the wants that naturally arise within us and making peace with those we do not have. Schopenhauer's view also speaks to authenticity. When we act in harmony with our true desires, our lives feel more genuine. People can sense when someone's work, art, relationships, or choices come from a place of real wanting rather than forced obligation. That authenticity often inspires others because it carries a certain energy that cannot be faked. It is the difference between someone living according to their own compass and someone following a borrowed map. Understanding that we cannot want what we want can also help us make better decisions. If we know that our actions can be consciously chosen, but our desires cannot, we can focus our energy on shaping the circumstances that align with those desires rather than fighting against them. This might mean exploring different experiences to discover what truly excites us, or removing ourselves from situations where our inner will is in constant conflict with external demands. It also means being patient with ourselves, because discovering what we truly want can take time and trial and error. There is also a paradox here. While we cannot control what we want, we can influence the environment that shapes how our desires grow. Just as a plant leans towards sunlight without choosing to, our inner will leans toward the things that nourish it. By exposing ourselves to new ideas, skills, and experiences, we might awaken desires we never knew we had. In this sense, life is not about commanding desire, but about cultivating the soil in which it naturally flourishes. When we see life through this lens, we stop fighting against the current of who we are. We stop blaming ourselves for not wanting what others want, and we stop trying to force ourselves into molds that don't fit. Instead, we learn to respect the quiet voice of the inner will, even when it leads us away from the paths most people take. And in doing so, we live not only with more clarity, but with a deeper sense of self, respect, and understanding. Arthur Schopenhauer's reminder that true happiness comes from within, not from external validation, is a lesson that resonates deeply in a world obsessed with appearances, achievements, and social approval. It is easy to believe that happiness is something we can obtain once we reach a certain milestone or receive recognition from others. We are conditioned from a young age to associate success with grades, job titles, wealth, popularity, and status. Yet time and again, we see people who have reached the highest peaks in these areas still feeling empty inside. Schopenhauer strips away the illusion and points to the truth. External validation may offer temporary pleasure, but it cannot provide the lasting contentment we crave. Real happiness is an inner state that exists independently of the world's applause. When our sense of happiness depends on others' approval, we give away the power over our emotional well-being. A compliment can lift us, but a criticism can crush us. Public recognition can make us feel on top of the world, but being overlooked can make us doubt our worth. In this way, our emotions rise and fall like a boat tossed by waves we cannot control. Schopenhauer's insight encourages us to anchor our sense of joy somewhere deeper. In the quiet, unshakable place inside ourselves where self-acceptance and self-respect live. True happiness from within comes when we no longer need constant reassurance to feel secure. This is not about arrogance or indifference, but about having a grounded sense of self that is not easily swayed by external circumstances. It means knowing who you are, understanding your values, and living in alignment with them even when others do not notice or approve. When you reach this state, external praise becomes a pleasant addition, not the foundation of your happiness. Consider how much energy people spend chasing validation. They tailor their choices, appearances, and even personalities to meet the expectations of others. Social media has amplified this tendency, offering an endless scoreboard of likes, views, and followers. While it can feel good to be acknowledged, this kind of happiness is fragile because it depends on maintaining an image that others approve of. The moment approval fades, so does the feeling of worth. Schopenhauer's philosophy invites us to step off this treadmill and cultivate a kind of happiness that no one else can give or take away. One way to do this is through self-reflection and honest assessment of what truly matters to us. We may realize that much of what we have been chasing is not actually our own desire, but a reflection of societal pressure. By stripping away the layers of expectation, we can focus on activities, relationships, and goals that bring fulfillment for their own sake, not for the praise they might generate. When our actions are driven by genuine interest and passion, the satisfaction we feel is deeper and longer lasting than the fleeting glow of approval. Another important aspect of this idea is learning to enjoy solitude. If happiness must always be fed by interaction and recognition from others, it will fade the moment we are alone. But if we can find contentment in our own company, in reading, creating, thinking, or simply being, we carry happiness with us wherever we go. This is not about withdrawing from people, but about building an inner world rich enough that our joy does not depend entirely on them. Happiness from within also involves accepting imperfection, both in ourselves and in life. When we rely on external validation, we often feel pressured to present an idealized version of ourselves. But when we stop depending on the approval of others, we can be more authentic, embracing our flaws as part of our humanity. This acceptance creates a sense of peace that no amount of external praise could ever match, because it is based on truth rather than performance. There is a quiet confidence that comes with this kind of happiness. It does not need to be broadcast or proved, and it is not threatened by the success or opinion of others. When you know your worth from the inside, you can celebrate others without feeling diminished, and you can handle criticism without falling apart. This emotional resilience is one of the greatest gifts of internal happiness. It allows you to move through life with stability, regardless of the shifting winds around you. Schopenhauer's teaching also carries a warning. If we neglect the cultivation of inner happiness, we will always be vulnerable to disappointment. The world is unpredictable, and no matter how much validation we receive, it can vanish without warning. If our happiness is tied to these external factors, we will be left feeling lost when they disappear. But if we have nurtured a deep inner contentment, we can weather these changes without losing our balance. This approach does not mean rejecting all forms of recognition or pleasure from the outside world. External approval can still be enjoyable, and achievements can still be celebrated. The difference lies in not making them the source of our happiness. Instead, they become a bonus rather than a necessity. When happiness flows from within, it is steady, consistent, and far less fragile. It comes from living authentically, honoring our own values, and finding meaning in the things that matter most to us on a personal level. Would you like me to move on and expand keynote No. 3 in the same deep reflective tone? Arthur Schopenhauer's reminder that true happiness comes from within, not from external validation, is a lesson that resonates deeply in a world obsessed with appearances, achievements, and social approval. It is easy to believe that happiness is something we can obtain once we reach a certain milestone or receive recognition from others. We are conditioned from a young age to associate success with grades, job titles, wealth, popularity, and status. Yet time and again, we see people who have reached the highest peaks in these areas still feeling empty inside. Schopenhauer strips away the illusion and points to the truth. External validation may offer temporary pleasure, but it cannot provide the lasting contentment we crave. Real happiness is an inner state that exists independently of the world's applause. When our sense of happiness depends on others' approval, we give away the power over our emotional well-being. A compliment can lift us, but a criticism can crush us. Public recognition can make us feel on top of the world, but being overlooked can make us doubt our worth. In this way, our emotions rise and fall like a boat tossed by waves we cannot control. Schopenhauer's insight encourages us to anchor our sense of joy somewhere deeper, in the quiet, unshakable place inside ourselves where self-acceptance and self-respect live. True happiness from within comes when we no longer need constant reassurance to feel secure. This is not about arrogance or indifference, but about having a grounded sense of self that is not easily swayed by external circumstances. It means knowing who you are, understanding your values, and living in alignment with them, even when others do not notice or approve. When you reach this state, external praise becomes a pleasant addition, not the foundation of your happiness. Consider how much energy people spend chasing validation. They tailor their choices, appearances, and even personalities to meet the expectations of others. Social media has amplified this tendency, offering an endless scoreboard of likes, views, and followers. While it can feel good to be acknowledged, this kind of happiness is fragile because it depends on maintaining an image that others approve of. The moment approval fades, so does the feeling of worth. Schopenhauer's philosophy invites us to step off this treadmill and cultivate a kind of happiness that no one else can give or take away. One way to do this is through self-reflection and honest assessment of what truly matters to us. We may realize that much of what we have been chasing is not actually our own desire, but a reflection of societal pressure. By stripping away the layers of expectation, we can focus on activities, relationships, and goals that bring fulfillment for their own sake, not for the praise they might generate. When our actions are driven by genuine interest and passion, the satisfaction we feel is deeper and longer lasting than the fleeting glow of approval. Another important aspect of this idea is learning to enjoy solitude. If happiness must always be fed by interaction and recognition from others, it will fade the moment we are alone. But if we can find contentment in our own company, in reading, creating, thinking, or simply being, we carry happiness with us wherever we go. This is not about withdrawing from people, but about building an inner world rich enough that our joy does not depend entirely on them. Happiness from within also involves accepting imperfection, both in ourselves and in life. When we rely on external validation, we often feel pressured to present an idealized version of ourselves. But when we stop depending on the approval of others, we can be more authentic, embracing our flaws as part of our humanity. This acceptance creates a sense of peace that no amount of external praise could ever match, because it is based on truth rather than performance. There is a quiet confidence that comes with this kind of happiness. It does not need to be broadcast or proved, and it is not threatened by the success or opinion of others. When you know your worth from the inside, you can celebrate others without feeling diminished, and you can handle criticism without falling apart. This emotional resilience is one of the greatest gifts of internal happiness. It allows you to move through life with stability, regardless of the shifting winds around you. Schopenhauer's teaching also carries a warning. If we neglect the cultivation of inner happiness, we will always be vulnerable to disappointment. The world is unpredictable, and no matter how much validation we receive, it can vanish without warning. If our happiness is tied to these external factors, we will be left feeling lost when they disappear. But if we have nurtured a deep inner contentment, we can weather these changes without losing our balance. This approach does not mean rejecting all forms of recognition or pleasure from the outside world. External approval can still be enjoyable, and achievements can still be celebrated. The difference lies in not making them the source of our happiness. Instead, they become a bonus rather than a necessity. When happiness flows from within, it is steady, consistent, and far less fragile. It comes from living authentically, honoring our own values, and finding meaning in the things that matter most to us on a personal level. Would you like me to move on and expand keynote No. 3 in the same deep, reflective tone? Arthur Schopenhauer's perspective that life should be seen as a discipline of the mind and spirit rather than simply a pursuit of pleasure challenges one of the most common assumptions about what it means to live well. From an early age, we are often taught, directly or indirectly, that happiness equals pleasure, that the more comfort, entertainment, and indulgence we can collect, the better our lives will be. Society constantly reinforces this idea through advertising, social media, and cultural narratives that frame comfort as the ultimate goal. But Schopenhauer urges us to see life differently, to approach it as a process of cultivation and refinement, where the true rewards are not instant gratification, but strength, wisdom, and inner mastery. The pursuit of pleasure, when made the central aim, can lead to a shallow and unsustainable way of living. Pleasures are fleeting. The joy they provide often fades quickly, leaving us searching for the next momentary high. The more we chase them, the more dependent we become on external conditions, lining up perfectly to keep us satisfied. This dependency makes us fragile because life inevitably contains hardship, loss, and struggle. If our happiness depends only on pleasure, then pain will always have the power to dismantle it. Schopenhauer's view redirects us toward a path where fulfillment is built on a stronger foundation, one that can endure regardless of changing circumstances. Seeing life as a discipline of the mind and spirit means valuing growth over comfort. It involves cultivating patience, resilience, and self-control, qualities that cannot be developed by living in constant ease. Challenges and discomforts become opportunities to strengthen ourselves rather than obstacles to avoid. Instead of asking, "How can I make life as pleasurable as possible?" we begin to ask, "How can I become the kind of person who can meet life's trials with clarity and courage?" This shift in focus transforms the way we engage with the world. In practical terms, this philosophy means that instead of avoiding difficulty, we sometimes seek it out for the sake of growth. For example, learning a difficult skill may be frustrating and tiring, but it sharpens the mind and builds discipline. Choosing to act with integrity when it costs us something develops moral strength. Facing fears rather than hiding from them teaches us courage. These moments may not always feel pleasurable in the moment, but they leave us stronger, wiser, and more capable of living well in the long term. There is also a spiritual dimension to this way of living. Schopenhauer saw that much of life's suffering comes from desires that are never fully satisfied. By disciplining the mind, we can learn to reduce the power of these restless desires and find contentment in simpler, more stable sources of meaning. This does not mean rejecting pleasure altogether, but recognizing its place as a gift to be enjoyed when it comes, but not as the foundation of our existence. When pleasure is no longer the goal, we are freer to appreciate it without clinging to it. A life centered on discipline of the mind and spirit also fosters independence. When our inner well-being depends on self-mastery rather than constant stimulation, we become less vulnerable to the changing moods of the world. The approval of others, the rise and fall of fortunes, the inevitable ups and downs of relationships, all these things lose some of their power to destabilize us. We carry within us a steady core shaped by habits of thought and action that keep us anchored. This approach also deepens our appreciation for the present moment. If we see life only through the lens of pleasure, we are constantly evaluating whether the current moment is good enough and searching for the next enjoyable experience. But when life is seen as a discipline, even difficult moments are valuable because they offer a chance to grow. The focus shifts from, am I enjoying this, to, what is this teaching me? That change in perspective makes us more open, curious, and accepting of whatever life brings. Disciplining the mind means training it to think clearly, to avoid being pulled entirely by emotions or impulses. It means learning to pause before reacting, to see situations from multiple perspectives, and to stay calm in the face of uncertainty. This kind of mental discipline allows us to make better decisions and to avoid being carried away by temporary passions or fears. Disciplining the spirit means cultivating virtues like compassion, humility, gratitude, and forgiveness. Qualities that enrich not only our own lives, but also the lives of those around us. It is important to note that this view of life does not deny the value of joy, comfort, or beauty. Instead, it places them within a larger framework where they are balanced by responsibility, purpose, and moral integrity. A life focused only on pleasure risks becoming empty, but a life guided by discipline finds depth and meaning in every experience, whether pleasurable or painful. By shifting our focus in this way, we free ourselves from the endless chase for more and instead devote ourselves to becoming more capable, more aware, more compassionate. In the end, the discipline of the mind and spirit prepares us for the reality that life will not always give us what we want. It teaches us to find peace not by avoiding hardship, but by meeting it with strength, to find joy not only in moments of comfort, but in the knowledge that we are growing through every challenge we face. Arthur Schopenhauer's insight that talent hits a target no one else can hit. Genius hits a target no one else can see, speaks to the power of vision and persistence. Talent is admirable. It represents skill, mastery, and the ability to excel at something within the realm of what is already known. But genius operates in a different dimension. It is not merely about perfecting what exists. It is about imagining what does not yet exist, seeing possibilities where others see nothing at all. This difference is not only about intellectual brilliance, but also about the courage to pursue a path that may be invisible to everyone else. It requires persistence, because walking a road that others cannot see often means walking it alone for a long time before anyone else understands or appreciates where it leads. In many ways, this principle applies to every area of life, not just art, science, or philosophy. Vision is the ability to see beyond the obvious, to imagine a future or a possibility that has not yet taken shape. It often begins with a thought, an intuition, or an idea that seems strange or impractical to the majority. History is filled with people who were told that their ideas would never work. Inventors, thinkers, and leaders who pursued something that others dismissed as impossible or irrelevant. They were able to persevere not because they had constant external encouragement, but because their vision was clear enough and their will strong enough to sustain them in the absence of approval. Persistence is the necessary companion to vision. Seeing the unseen is one thing, bringing it into reality is another. The road from idea to achievement is rarely smooth. It is marked by setbacks, doubts, and long stretches where progress seems invisible. Those who lack persistence often give up before the vision can materialize. But those who hold on, who keep moving forward despite the silence or skepticism of others, eventually reach a place where their idea becomes visible not only to them, but to the world. One of the challenges of having a unique vision is that it can make you feel isolated when your goals or ideas do not fit the standard mold. It is easy to doubt yourself, especially when others question or dismiss your efforts. But Schopenhauer's words remind us that this is often the nature of originality. The target you are aiming at is not visible to everyone else. It is not that you are wrong, it is that you are seeing something that others have not yet learned to see. This understanding can help you stay grounded and confident even when external validation is absent. Cultivating this kind of vision begins with curiosity and openness. It means being willing to look beyond conventional boundaries, to question assumptions, and to explore ideas that others might overlook. It also requires a certain tolerance for ambiguity, because the path forward will not always be clear. In fact, the willingness to take steps without knowing exactly how everything will unfold is often what allows new possibilities to emerge. Many breakthroughs happen not because someone had all the answers, but because they were willing to move forward with what they could see and trust that the rest would reveal itself in time. Persistence, in turn, is strengthened by purpose. If you are only pursuing a vision for superficial reasons, it will be hard to keep going when obstacles appear. But if the vision is deeply connected to your values, passions, and sense of meaning, it becomes much harder to abandon. Purpose fuels resilience. It keeps you working through the long nights, the rejections, and the repeated attempts that don't seem to bring success. It turns setbacks into lessons rather than defeats. Another important element in this process is the ability to adapt without losing sight of the ultimate goal. Sometimes the path to the target changes. The methods or strategies you first imagined may not work out as planned. Persistence is not about stubbornly clinging to one approach. It is about holding on to the vision while being flexible enough to find new ways of reaching it. Many great achievements are the result of countless adjustments made along the way, each one informed by experience and a deeper understanding of the challenge. The relationship between vision and persistence also teaches humility. Even if you have the ability to see what others cannot, you must still put in the work to make it real. Inspiration without effort is wasted potential. The process of bringing an unseen idea into reality will demand discipline, sacrifice, and often the willingness to face failure multiple times. But each failure, when approached with the right mindset, becomes a step closer to success. Ultimately, Schopenhauer's insight is a reminder that aiming for targets others cannot see is both a privilege and a responsibility. It means you have been given the gift of perspective, the ability to imagine something beyond the current horizon, and the challenge of proving that it can exist. This is not a path for the faint-hearted, because it demands both the vision to dream and the persistence to do the slow, often invisible work required to make the dream real. Those who embrace both qualities are the ones who change the course of their own lives, and often the lives of others as well. Arthur Schopenhauer's belief that compassion is the foundation of morality offers a timeless reminder that our highest ethical calling is rooted not in rules or abstract principles, but in our ability to feel and respond to the suffering of others. Many systems of morality focus on laws, duties, or logical reasoning to determine right from wrong, but Schopenhauer places compassion at the very center. For him, morality begins when we recognize ourselves in others, when we see their pain as real and significant, not as an abstract concept, but as something that touches our own humanity. This perspective shifts morality from a cold calculation to a deeply human response, driven by empathy and connection. Compassion, in Schopenhauer's sense, is not mere pity or condescension. It is the genuine understanding that another being's joy and suffering matter just as much as our own. It requires us to step outside the narrow boundaries of self-interest and acknowledge that the inner reality of others is as vivid and important as the one we inhabit. This is not always easy, because human nature often leans toward prioritizing the self. But when we allow ourselves to feel compassion, we bridge the invisible gap between me and them. And in that space, morality begins to grow. One of the reasons Schopenhauer valued compassion so highly is that it transcends cultural, religious, and social boundaries. While moral codes vary across time and place, the experience of suffering is universal. A hungry child feels hunger the same way regardless of nationality, and a grieving heart aches the same way regardless of belief system. Compassion cuts through these differences because it is based on shared human experience. It does not require agreement on every moral issue. It simply asks us to acknowledge and respond to the pain of others. Living with compassion as a guiding principle changes the way we make decisions. Instead of asking, "What benefits me the most?" we begin to ask, "How will my actions affect others?" This shift in perspective can influence everything from personal relationships to large-scale societal choices. Compassion can temper ambition with kindness, soften justice with mercy, and transform competition into cooperation. It encourages us to use our power, knowledge, and resources not just for personal gain, but for the well-being of those around us. Compassion also strengthens community bonds. In a world where individualism is often celebrated above all else, genuine concern for others can feel rare. Yet communities thrive when people look out for one another, when they are willing to lend a hand without expecting immediate returns. This mutual care builds trust, reduces isolation, and creates an environment where people can flourish. Without compassion, societies risk becoming cold and fragmented, where individuals see each other as obstacles rather than allies. It is important to note that compassion is not weakness. Some mistake it for a form of passivity, imagining that a compassionate person simply absorbs injustice without resistance. In truth, compassion often demands courage. To truly care for others means being willing to stand against cruelty, exploitation, and indifference, even when it is uncomfortable or risky. Compassion motivates action, whether it is speaking out for someone who has no voice, offering help when it is inconvenient, or making personal sacrifices for the sake of another's well-being. On a personal level, compassion enriches our own lives as much as it helps others. When we cultivate a compassionate mindset, we become more patient, understanding, and forgiving. We are less quick to judge because we recognize that everyone carries burdens we cannot always see. This understanding fosters deeper, more meaningful relationships built on trust and mutual respect rather than fear or competition. Compassion can also lighten our own emotional load. By focusing on the needs of others, we often find perspective on our own challenges and discover a sense of purpose that transcends personal struggles. Practicing compassion requires conscious effort, especially in a world that often rewards self-interest over selflessness. It may begin with small acts, listening without interrupting, offering help without being asked, choosing kindness when irritation would be easier. Over time, these habits shape our character, making compassion a natural and instinctive part of who we are. Even when our capacity to change a situation is limited, the simple act of acknowledging another's pain can be powerful. Sometimes, the knowledge that someone sees and cares about our suffering is enough to give us strength to endure. Schopenhauer's emphasis on compassion also challenges the idea that morality can be fully explained through logic or obligation alone. While reason can help us weigh consequences and fairness, it is compassion that gives morality its heart. Without compassion, moral rules risk becoming rigid and detached from the reality of human experience. A truly moral life, in Schopenhauer's view, is not just about following rules, but about cultivating the ability to feel deeply for others, to act from a place of shared humanity rather than cold calculation. In a time when the world can feel divided, this message is more relevant than ever. Compassion is the thread that can weave connection across differences, soften hardened hearts, and remind us that beneath our varied identities, we share the same essential nature. By making compassion the foundation of our morality, we not only create a more just and humane world for others, but we also nurture the best and truest parts of ourselves. Arthur Schopenhauer's philosophy invites us to find meaning and purpose in life's struggles and uncertainties, a perspective that stands in sharp contrast to the common desire to avoid pain at all costs. He recognized that suffering is an inevitable part of the human experience, woven into the very fabric of existence. Instead of denying or resisting this truth, he urged us to face it with openness, seeing it not as a meaningless burden, but as a potential source of growth, insight, and transformation. Struggle, in this view, is not a detour from life. It is part of the path itself. When we approach life expecting it to be free of hardship, every obstacle feels like a personal injustice. We interpret setbacks as evidence that something is wrong, either with ourselves or with the world. But if we accept struggle as a natural and even necessary part of existence, our relationship to it changes. It becomes less about asking, "Why is this happening to me?" and more about asking, "What can I learn from this?" Schopenhauer's wisdom lies in helping us shift from resistance to engagement, from avoiding pain to seeking the meaning that pain can reveal. Struggles often strip away the illusions we carry. They force us to confront truths about ourselves, our priorities, and our values that we might otherwise ignore. In moments of uncertainty, we are reminded of how fragile our plans can be, how quickly the ground beneath us can shift. This realization, while unsettling, can also be clarifying. It encourages us to hold more lightly to rigid expectations and to cultivate resilience, adaptability, and patience. These qualities are rarely developed in times of ease. They are forged in the fires of challenge. Finding purpose in struggle requires a shift in how we measure a good life. Instead of defining it solely by comfort, success, or stability, we begin to value depth of character, wisdom, and the ability to endure. When we see struggle as an opportunity to grow, we start to recognize that the moments we once wished away often become the very moments that shape us most profoundly. Adversity has a way of refining us, stripping away superficial concerns and revealing what truly matters. Uncertainty plays a similar role. It is tempting to see uncertainty as a flaw in life, something to be eliminated by controlling every variable and predicting every outcome. Yet Schopenhauer understood that uncertainty is an unavoidable part of existence and that it can even be a gift. The unknown keeps life dynamic and open to possibility. It forces us to remain alert, adaptable, and humble. Without uncertainty, there would be no room for discovery, surprise, or the kind of creativity that arises from having to navigate the unexpected. One of the most powerful aspects of embracing struggle and uncertainty is the way it deepens empathy. When we have faced our own difficulties, we become more capable of understanding the pain of others. Our experiences of loss, failure, or fear give us a shared language with those who are suffering. This empathy can become a source of connection and solidarity, reminding us that while struggles are inevitable, we do not have to face them entirely alone. There is also a sense of liberation in accepting struggle as part of life. When we stop demanding that life be free of pain, we release ourselves from constant disappointment. Instead, we can meet challenges as they come, working with them rather than fighting against their existence. This does not mean we stop trying to improve our circumstances, but that we no longer see difficulty as evidence that life has failed us. We begin to recognize that meaning is often found not in the absence of hardship, but in how we choose to respond to it. Schopenhauer's perspective encourages a long-term view of life. Struggles that seem unbearable in the moment often make sense in hindsight as we see the ways they shaped our path or prepared us for future challenges. Uncertainty that once caused anxiety may later be remembered as a period of transformation or opportunity. By trusting that these experiences can contribute to our growth, we can move through them with a greater sense of purpose, even when their value is not immediately clear. Purpose itself often emerges from the interplay between struggle and our response to it. Many people discover their deepest motivations in moments of hardship, a cause they wish to fight for, a truth they wish to share, or a skill they wish to develop to help themselves and others. These purposes are often more enduring than goals rooted in comfort or convenience, because they are tested and refined by real-world challenges. Ultimately, finding meaning in life's struggles and uncertainties requires both courage and humility. The courage to face difficulty without turning away, and the humility to accept that we will not always understand why in the moment. It is an invitation to live more deeply, to see life not just as a sequence of pleasant moments to be collected, but as a rich, complex journey in which every twist and turn has the potential to teach, shape, and strengthen us